The Quantum Conundrum. Captain Maya Chen sat in her decidedly non-ergonomic command chair aboard the UES Paradox, watching the starfield stretch and compress in fascinating patterns through the main view screen. She'd insisted on the uneven chair design, claiming the unpredictable support kept her mind sharp during long shifts. The rest of the bridge followed her philosophy, with workstations arranged in what appeared to be random configurations, screens that occasionally shifted colors based on cosmic background radiation, and a gravity field that subtly varied throughout the day. "Captain, we're picking up something interesting," said Lieutenant Rodriguez from the sensor station, his console displaying information in a spiral pattern that would have given most beings a headache. "Looks like a fleet. Big one. Emerging from what I can only describe as the most boring form of FTL travel I've ever seen." Maya straightened in her chair, feeling it adjust unpredictably beneath her. On screen, maximum magnification. The view screen shifted to reveal a vast armada of ships emerging from perfectly symmetrical warp portals. Each vessel gleamed with polished precision, not a panel out of place, not a light flickering unevenly. They arranged themselves in a flawless geometric formation, like a three-dimensional chess set placed with mathematical perfection. "Well, that's certainly orderly," Maya remarked, unable to keep a smile from spraying across her face. "Hail them. Standard protocols." "They're already hailing us," Communications Officer Park replied. "Very formal message structure. Lots of redundancies and checksums. Should I clean it up or play it as received?" "As received. Let's appreciate their style." The view screen flickered to show a tall, slender humanoid with silver-blue skin and features arranged with perfect symmetry. The being wore a uniform so precisely tailored it appeared to have been applied by mathematical formula rather than sewn. Not a wrinkle disturbed its surface, not a thread out of place. "This is High Commander Xerath of the Grand Valtherian Empire," the alien announced, each syllable measured to exact duration. "Your vessel has entered regulated space without proper navigational matrices or structural coherence. You will immediately align your systems with our beacon and prepare for inspection. Any deviation from standard protocols will be considered hostile." Maya leaned forward, her chair squeaking in protest. "This is Captain Maya Chen of the United Earth Ship Paradox. Wonderful to meet you, High Commander. I'm afraid we might have a slight problem with your alignment request. Our navigation systems are, well, not exactly compatible with conventional matrices." The High Commander's perfectly sculpted features registered the first hint of confusion. "All vessels must comply with universal navigational standards. It is impossible to achieve interstellar travel without proper mathematical alignment." "Impossible is just a word we haven't properly negotiated with yet," Maya replied cheerfully. "You see, our propulsion system doesn't exactly follow what you might call fixed rules. We prefer a more conversational approach to physics." Behind her, Chief Engineer Eli Kaminsky suppressed a snort from his engineering station, where readouts flowed in patterns resembling abstract art more than technical data. The High Commander's eyes narrowed slightly. "Captain Chen, I fail to comprehend your meaning. Physics is not a matter of conversation. It is absolute." "Is it though?" Maya gestured to her helmsman. "Lieutenant Kim, would you mind demonstrating our standard maneuvering pattern alpha? Nothing too flashy." "Aye, Captain. Standard flashiness it is." Before the Valtherian commander could respond, the Paradox began to move. Rather than the smooth, predictable motion of traditional spacecraft, it seemed to simultaneously stretch and compress, briefly appearing to be in multiple positions at once before settling into a lazy spiral that somehow managed to create a perfect fractal pattern in its wake. The Valtherian commander's perfect composure cracked visibly. What are you doing? Your ship is violating conservation of mass and energy." "Oh, we're not violating anything," Maya assured him. "We're just being a bit more flexible with the interpretation. The universe is much more accommodating when you ask nicely instead of assuming it can only work one way." As if to emphasize her point, The lighting on the Paradox Bridge shifted through a spectrum of colors that seemed to include several that shouldn't technically exist. "This is impossible," the commander insisted, though his voice now held a hint of uncertainty. "Our sensors cannot make sense of your propulsion method." "That's because your sensors are too polite," Maya explained. "They're waiting for reality to make sense instead of joining in the conversation. We've found that quantum particles are quite chatty if you're willing to listen to all their possibilities at once." On the Valtherian bridge visible behind the commander, Maya could see several technicians frantically working at their stations, while others stared in apparent horror at their readings. "Captain, they're scanning us with approximately 16 different types of sensors," reported Lieutenant Rodriguez. "Should I put on a show for them?" "Nothing too dramatic," Maya cautioned. "We don't want to overwhelm our new friends." The High Commander was now consulting with what appeared to be a science officer, their conversation just beyond the audio pickup range. When he turned back to the screen, his perfect posture had developed the slightest hint of a slump. "Captain Chen, our preliminary analysis indicates your vessel is operating on principles that contradict established Valtherian physics. We request immediate technical data exchange to understand this anomaly." Maya's smile widened. "We'd be delighted to share our approach. Fair warning, though. Our technical manuals tend to include jokes, philosophical tangents, and the occasional recipe. Our engineers find it helps the physics go down easier." Before the commander could respond, a junior officer rushed to his side, urgently displaying a datapad. The commander's eyes widened as he reviewed the information. "Captain," he said, his voice now betraying genuine alarm, "our sensors are detecting a severe spatial anomaly forming in this sector. It appears to be a cascade reality distortion that doesn't follow any known natural pattern." Maya's expression turned serious as she checked her own readings. "We're picking it up too. That's definitely not one of ours." She glanced at her science officer. "Analysis." Lieutenant Commander Jackson studied her displays, which seemed to be showing data in the form of interlocking geometric patterns rather than charts or numbers. "It's a complex quantum temporal distortion, Captain. Not naturally occurring. If I had to guess, someone's been playing with the fundamental forces without asking permission first." The Valtherian commander was now receiving reports from multiple officers, all displaying increasing alarm. "This distortion is expanding at an exponential rate. Our models predict catastrophic spacetime destabilization within 4 hours. "Well," Maya said, leaning back in her unpredictable chair, "it seems we have a common problem. Commander Xerath, perhaps it's time we combined our different approaches to physics. Sometimes, the universe throws these little challenges at us to encourage cooperation." The commander stared at her for a long moment, clearly wrestling with the implications. "Our standard protocols have no contingency for this type of anomaly." "That's where we humans tend to excel," Maya replied with a confident smile. "We specialize in the unexpected. I propose an immediate joint operation. Your precision and our flexibility. Together, I think we might have exactly what this situation needs." After a brief consultation with his officers, the commander straightened his already immaculate uniform and nodded. "Very well, Captain Chen. The Valtherian Empire accepts your proposal for collaboration. But I must warn you, we operate according to strict hierarchical protocols. And we operate according to what feels right at the moment," Maya countered cheerfully. "I suspect we'll both learn something valuable from this experience." As the crews began preparations for the joint mission, Maya couldn't help noticing the mixture of horror and fascination on the faces of the Valtherian officers observing the casual way her crew interacted with their stations, patting consoles affectionately, occasionally arguing with particularly stubborn equipment, and laughing when the ship's gravity hiccuped in response to the growing anomaly. "Captain," Engineer Kaminsky called from his station, "I've been chatting with the anomaly's quantum signature. It's giving me some very interesting ideas about how we might approach this problem." The look on High Commander Xerath's face at the words "chatting with the anomaly" was, Maya decided, worth the price of admission alone. This was shaping up to be the most interesting first contact in her entire career. "Well then," she said, rising from her chair, "let's go introduce the Valtherians to our unique approach to universal diplomacy. The impossible solution." 2 hours later, Chief Engineer Eli Kaminsky stood in the massive engineering bay of the Valtherian flagship Immutable Law, surrounded by increasingly agitated Valtherian engineers. The stark, perfectly organized space made him uncomfortable. Every tool arranged by precise mathematical principles, every control surface designed for optimal efficiency without a trace of personality or flair. "So you're telling me," said Chief Engineer Vorin of the Valtherian fleet, "that your proposed solution is to negotiate with the anomaly." The tall, silver-skinned alien spoke the word negotiate as if it tasted strange in his mouth. Eli nodded enthusiastically, running a hand through his perpetually disheveled hair. "Exactly. This anomaly isn't just breaking the rules, it's rewriting them as it goes. Your approach of trying to force it back into conventional physics is like trying to make water flow uphill by yelling at it. But that's not how reality functions," Vorin insisted, his perfectly manicured hands gripping a datapad so tightly that Eli worried it might shatter. "Physical laws are immutable. Our calculations are precise. And that's your problem right there," Eli replied, pulling out what appeared to be an ordinary wrench from his toolkit. "You're treating the universe like it has no choice but to behave. We've found it responds much better when given options." Before Vorin could object, Eli held up the wrench and spoke to it conversationally. "Hey there, would you mind helping us demonstrate a little quantum flexibility?" To the astonishment of the Valtherian engineers, the wrench began to glow with an inner light that shouldn't have been possible, and then slowly bent itself into a perfect spiral without any physical force being applied. "What? How?" Vorin stammered, his perfect composure finally cracking completely. "I asked nicely," Eli said with a shrug. "Look, I know this goes against everything you've been taught, but the universe isn't actually as rigid as you think. Quantum mechanics proved that centuries ago, particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed. We just took that principle and expanded on it." "But that's at the quantum level," protested another Valtherian engineer. "Macro objects don't behave that way." "Says who?" Eli countered. "The universe. Have you asked it lately? We found that the dividing line between quantum and classical physics is more of a friendly suggestion than a hard boundary. It's all about establishing the right relationship." On the main view screen, the spatial anomaly had grown, now resembling a twisted knot in space-time that pulsed with colors that shouldn't exist in normal space. The Valtherian vessels had arranged themselves in a perfect defensive formation, while the paradox meandered around them in what appeared to be random patterns, but somehow always ended up exactly where it needed to be. Captain Maya Chen's voice came over the communication system. "How's it going down there, Eli? Our Valtherian friends making progress with your approach?" "We're still in the philosophical debate stage," Eli replied cheerfully. "I'm about to introduce them to reality persuasion techniques." "Remember, we need results within the next 2 hours," Maya reminded him. "The anomaly's growth rate is accelerating." "Understood, Captain. We'll get there." Eli turned back to the Valtherian engineers. "All right, here's what we're going to do. I need your most precise scanning equipment, the kind you use to measure quantum states." Vorin hesitated, then nodded to one of his subordinates, who retrieved a device of obvious complexity and precision. "This is our quantum harmonic analyzer. It can measure subatomic states with 99% accuracy." "Perfect," Eli said, taking the device and promptly beginning to modify it with tools from his kit. "Now I'm going to make some adjustments that will probably offend your sense of order, but I promise they're necessary." As he worked, removing certain components and adding others from his own supplies, he continued explaining. "The key to understanding our approach is accepting that the universe has more personality than you've been giving it credit for. It's not a machine following rules. It's more like a complex, intelligent system that responds to how you interact with it." That is pure mysticism, Voron objected, though he watched Eli's modifications with increasing fascination. Is it though? Eli countered. Your own quantum physics acknowledges that the observer affects the observed. We just took that principle and ran with it. We found that if you approach reality with rigid expectations, it tends to be rigid back. But if you approach with flexibility and a sense of humor, suddenly many more possibilities open up. He finished his modifications and held up the transformed device, which now had a distinctly asymmetrical appearance and several components that glowed with soft, shifting lights. What have you done to our analyzer? Asked Voron, a mix of horror and curiosity in his voice. I've made it more conversational, Eli replied. Now, instead of just measuring quantum states, it can suggest alternatives to them. Watch. He pointed the device at the nearest bulkhead and activated it. Instead of the expected scanning beam, it emitted a complex pattern of energy that seemed to ripple through the air. Where the pattern touched the bulkhead, the metal briefly shimmered, appearing to exist in multiple states at once before settling back, but now with a subtle iridescent quality that hadn't been there before. You've altered the fundamental atomic structure, exclaimed one of the younger Valtherian engineers, rushing forward with her own scanner. But that's impossible, Eli suggested with a smile. I didn't alter it so much as suggest that it might enjoy exploring other states of being. The atoms agreed. Voron was staring at his own readings in disbelief. This defies all established principles of matter manipulation. Only if you insist that those principles can't evolve, Eli said. Now, imagine applying this same approach to our anomaly problem. Instead of trying to force it to behave according to your established physical laws, we suggest alternative expressions that are less destructive to the surrounding space-time. For the first time, a flicker of understanding crossed Voron's features. You're proposing to communicate with a spatial anomaly. Exactly. Eli beamed at him. Now you're getting it. And the best part is, we can combine your precision with our flexibility. Your measurements are fantastic, the most accurate I've ever seen. We just need to use that data as a starting point for conversation rather than control. On the bridge of the paradox, Captain Maya Chen was engaged in a similar conversation with High Commander Xerath. They stood before a holographic representation of the anomaly, which the Valtherian systems displayed as a precise mathematical model, while the human overlay added swirls of potential probability and quantum state options. Your approach is fundamentally flawed, Xerath was saying, though with less certainty than before. You cannot simply ignore the laws of physics. We're not ignoring them, Maya corrected him. We're negotiating with them. Big difference. Your approach assumes the universe has no choice but to follow rules. Ours recognizes that at the quantum level, everything is about probability and potential, not certainty. But that leads to chaos, does it? Maya gestured around her ship's bridge, where despite the apparent randomness, everything functioned perfectly. Or does it lead to a different kind of order, one that embraces possibility rather than restricting it? Before Xerath could respond, Lieutenant Rodriguez called out from his station. Captain, the anomaly is responding to our initial probability suggestions. It's altering its expansion pattern. Both captains turned to the holographic display, where the angry red swirl of the anomaly had indeed changed, its expansion slowing in some directions while accelerating in others. It's becoming more coherent, observed the Valtherian science officer. The quantum fluctuations are aligning along specific probability curves. It's listening to us, Maya said with satisfaction. Now we need to give it better options than expand until everything is destroyed. Commander Xerath, this is where your precision comes in. We need exact calculations for stable probability states that the anomaly can adopt. For a long moment, the Valtherian commander stood silent, his internal struggle visible on his face. Then, with a slight nod, he turned to his science officer. Begin quantum harmonic analysis of all stable states compatible with the anomaly's current configuration. integrate with the human probability suggestions. As the two crews began working together, the initially rigid Valtherian officers gradually adapted to the humans' more fluid approach, while the humans learned to appreciate the incredible precision the Valtherians brought to their calculations. In engineering, Eli had managed to combine the modified quantum analyzer with the Valtherians' main deflector array, creating what he called a reality suggestion amplifier. The device hummed with energy that seemed to flow in impossible patterns, causing several Valtherian engineers to look away for fear of developing headaches. Ready to initialize, Eli reported over the comm. Fair warning. This might get a little weird. Define weird, requested Vorin, who had surprisingly become Eli's most engaged collaborator. Well, local reality might get a bit flexible. Nothing dangerous, but don't be surprised if colors taste funny for a while or gravity decides to take a coffee break. Before Vorin could protest, Captain Chen gave the order. Initiate the quantum dialogue. The combined device activated, sending a complex pulse of energy toward the anomaly. The response was immediate and dramatic. The anomaly pulsed, shifted, and then began to reorganize itself into a more structured pattern. "It's working," exclaimed the Valtherian science officer. "The destructive expansion is slowing." But even as she spoke, a new problem emerged. The anomaly, while no longer expanding chaotically, had begun to emit pulses of energy that caused reality itself to ripple outward from its center. "Oh, that's interesting," Eli remarked, studying the new readings. "It's not just listening, it's answering back." "What do you mean?" demanded Xerath. "I mean," said Maya, leaning forward in her chair, "that we've opened a dialogue with a quantum phenomenon that might be a bit more self-aware than we anticipated. And now it has something to say." The new understanding. As the ripples of distorted reality spread outward from the anomaly, both the human and Valtherian crews scrambled to adapt. On the Paradox, the effects were met with fascination and rapid adjustment. Crew members casually stepping around areas where the deck seemed to exist in multiple places at once, or pausing mid-sentence when time briefly flowed backward before continuing, as if nothing unusual had happened. Aboard the Valtherian flagship Immutable Law, the response was markedly different. Alarms blared as systems detected fundamental physical constants shifting. Crew members froze in horror as perfectly ordered reality began to display the one thing the Valtherian mind found truly terrifying: unpredictability. "All stations, maintain protocol." High Commander Xerath ordered, his voice strained but commanding. "These are temporary fluctuations. Focus on your duties." Captain Maya Chen's voice came over the communication channel. "Commander, I suggest you tell your crew to relax a little. Fighting these fluctuations just makes them worse, like quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. Relaxation is not part of Valtherian crisis protocol." Xerath replied stiffly, though Maya noticed his perfect posture had developed a distinct slouch. "Maybe it should be," she suggested gently. "Look at how the anomaly is responding. When your ships maintain rigid formation and emit those perfectly ordered energy patterns, the ripples intensify around you. When my ship goes with the flow, the effects are much milder." On the main view screen, this difference was becoming obvious. The Paradox moved through the distorted space with surprising grace, sometimes briefly phasing partially out of normal spacetime, but always returning unharmed. The Valtherian vessels, by contrast, struggled to maintain their positions, their engines straining as they fought against the shifting nature of reality around them. In the joint engineering space they had established, Eli Kaminsky and Chief Engineer Vorin were deep in discussion, surrounded by displays showing the increasingly complex patterns emerging from the anomaly. "It's not just random distortion," Eli insisted, pointing to one particularly intricate pattern. "There's structure here, language almost. The anomaly is trying to establish a new set of physical parameters." "But why?" Vorin asked, his initial resistance now replaced by genuine scientific curiosity. What purpose could be served by rewriting local physics? Maybe it's not about purpose in the way we understand it, Eli suggested. Maybe it's more like expression, art even. Voren looked skeptical. Spatial anomalies do not create art. Says who? Eli countered with a grin. The universe is full of beauty at every scale, from subatomic particle interactions to galactic formations. Why not a quantum anomaly that's discovered self-expression? Before Voren could respond, a new pattern emerged in the data, one so striking that both engineers fell silent. Unlike the chaotic fluctuations before, this was a perfect fractal pattern that expanded and contracted with mathematical precision, while simultaneously embracing unpredictable quantum variations. That's beautiful, Voren admitted, his voice hushed. And look at the underlying equations, Eli pointed out. They're a perfect hybrid of traditional physics and quantum possibilities. It's like the anomaly is showing us how both approaches can coexist. On the bridge, Maya had joined Xerath aboard his ship, bringing what she called her reality intuition to complement his strategic thinking. They stood side by side, watching as the anomaly continued to evolve. I believe I'm beginning to understand your approach, Captain Chen, Xerath said, his tone contemplative. Your species embraces uncertainty as a fundamental principle. We had to, Maya replied. Our history is full of moments where rigid thinking led to disaster. We learned that adaptability isn't just useful, it's essential. The universe doesn't care about our rules or expectations. It just is, in all its complex, beautiful, sometimes terrifying glory. The Valtherian philosophy has always been built on order, Xerath explained. We believe that understanding comes from precise measurement and adherence to natural laws. And that's valuable, Maya agreed. We need that precision. But we also need the ability to step back and say, what if everything I know is just one possibility among many? That's where innovation comes from. As they spoke, the anomaly's pattern shifted again. And this time the ripples it sent out were different, more organized, less disruptive. On Maya's ship, crew members reported that the reality fluctuations were taking on almost musical qualities, with harmonious patterns emerging from the chaos. It's responding to our combined approach, Maya realized. When we work together, your precision and our flexibility, it mirrors that synthesis back to us. As Xerath studied the new patterns, his analytical mind finding unexpected beauty in the interplay of order and possibility. If that is true, then perhaps the solution is not to contain or eliminate the anomaly, but to dance with it, Maya finished. To join its exploration of what reality can be, but guide it toward expressions that don't threaten our existence. For the first time since their meeting, Xerath's face showed the ghost of what might have been a smile. A dance requires partners who understand each other's movements. Maya nodded. Exactly. And we've just begun to learn its steps. Over the next hour, the combined human and Valtherian teams developed what they called quantum choreography, a complex series of energy patterns, gravitational pulses, and subspace frequencies that communicated with the anomaly in its own emerging language. Led by Eli and Voren, the engineering teams modified their ships to emit precisely calibrated signals that offered the anomaly new ways to express itself without disrupting the surrounding spacetime. The response was dramatic and unexpected. The anomaly began to contract, its wild energy folding in on itself, not in collapse but in a kind of condensation. Where before it had been a chaotic storm of quantum possibilities, it now became a swirling, stable vortex of iridescent energy. It's stabilizing, reported the Valtherian science officer, her voice betraying uncharacteristic excitement. The space-time disruptions are harmonizing into a sustainable pattern. On the engineering deck, Eli watched the transformation with a satisfied smile. It's found a way to exist without breaking everything around it. Like a teenager who's learned there are better ways to express individuality than setting the house on fire. Voren, to everyone's surprise, actually laughed. A short, startled sound quickly suppressed, but definitely a laugh. An unusual analogy, but surprisingly apt. As the immediate crisis subsided, both fleets maintained their positions around the now stable anomaly, monitoring its behavior and continuing their quantum dialogue. The atmosphere aboard the Valtherian vessels had subtly changed. The rigid formality remained, but here and there, crew members could be seen experimenting with the humans' more intuitive approach to their equipment, even occasionally patting consoles in appreciation when they performed particularly well. In the command center they had established for joint operations, Maya and Xerath reviewed the data from the past several hours, planning their next steps. The anomaly appears to be permanently stable now, Xerath observed. Our scientists are fascinated by its properties. It seems to exist simultaneously within normal space and what your quantum physicists call probability space. A bridge between approaches, Maya said thoughtfully, between seeing the universe as fixed and seeing it as full of possibilities. Much like our two species, Xerath noted with unexpected insight. The Valtherian Empire has always valued order above all else. We sought to understand the universe by categorizing and controlling it. While humans threw ourselves into the chaos and tried to surf it, Maya added with a smile. Both approaches have their strengths and weaknesses. Indeed. Xerath hesitated, then continued, this collaboration has been illuminating. The High Council will be most interested in the possibilities it presents, as will Earth's United Exploration Command. Maya agreed. I imagine there's a lot more our species could learn from each other. As they spoke, a junior Valtherian officer approached, carrying a data pad with recent analysis of the anomaly. As he handed it to Xerath, the pad briefly glitched, displaying its information as a dancing pattern of light rather than text. Instead of reacting with alarm, the young officer paused, tilted his head curiously, and then chuckled. Maya and Xerath exchanged surprised glances at the sound. It appears your crew is adapting to unpredictability, Maya observed. A concerning development, Xerath replied, but the slight upward curve of his mouth belied his words. Efficiency may suffer if my officers begin to find amusement in quantum fluctuations. Or maybe they'll discover new possibilities that perfect efficiency never could have revealed, Maya suggested. Sometimes you have to let go of certainty to find innovation. Xerath considered this, then made a decision that would have been unthinkable days earlier. Captain Chen, the Valtherian Empire would like to propose a formal exchange program. Selected officers from both our fleets would serve aboard each other's vessels for a standard cycle. We have much to learn from your unconventional methods, and we could certainly benefit from your precision and discipline, Maya agreed enthusiastically. Though I should warn you, Valtherian officers serving aboard human vessels may find themselves developing a sense of humor. Side effects may include occasional laughter, improvisational thinking, and a disturbing tendency to see possibilities rather than limitations. We shall consider it an acceptable risk, Xerath replied, and this time there was no mistaking the smile that briefly transformed his features. After all, as you humans say, impossible is just a word we haven't properly negotiated with yet. As the two captains sealed their agreement, the stabilized anomaly pulsed with harmonic energy, as if expressing its own approval of this new understanding between order and chaos, precision and possibility, Valtherian and human. And throughout both fleets, crew members found themselves looking at the universe around them with new eyes, seeing not just what was, but what could be. When Eli later attempted to explain to Vorin how humans had developed their unique approach to physics, he simply said, "One day we realized that the universe itself has a sense of humor. Once you learn to laugh with it instead of demanding it behave, you'd be amazed at what becomes possible." And to everyone's surprise, Vorin nodded thoughtfully and replied, "Perhaps it is time the Valtherian Empire learned to laugh as well."